picture we felt wasn't being given at all. There was an activity happened when we do what's called testing. Now in other countries we just did what we do, but the Irish always seemed to be moved, and a crew was brought out with other equipment that wouldn't normally be there. It was all very hush-hush, very secret. But there was another ongoing operation which we definitely knew that they weren't sending the right information. Without going into the technical side, I don't want to lose you, but basically it's cuttings. It looks like rough sand. It's cuttings of rock, and it's meant to be analysed every half hour. That you drill through it. There's 3 bags taken. 1 bag for the rig, 1 bag for the oil company, 1 bag for the state. And it was a common practice. We saw it ourselves, and we were showing it, that the geologists working for the oil company, when you get to know these people who are living out there, they were told to thin out the sample. So that went on. Then, this is important as well, worldwide, oil and gas exploration. You see, by the way, an awful lot of reports are coming in of dry wells. What a dry well is, that supposedly no shows or very little shows. It's not commercial, so they cap it. Even the way we capped it, the kind of material we used, it was stuff. It was closing a well for it to be re-drilled. It wasn't the standard. No, we did cap wells. That is fact, meaning it was a dry hole. But there was some stuff that was coming out as dry holes. The way they were capped was that they were designed to come back to again. And that stuff doesn't go bad in the ground. 30 years is not going to make a big difference in something that took millions to cook, you know. The oil and gas scene worldwide, throughout the early 1980s, it just went down to about $8 a barrel, and the equivalent in gas. Rigs were stacked up. The rigs are owned by drilling companies. The likes of the Bushes and the Halliburtons and all them, they're actually oil services people. They're not oil company people. They hired their stuff to oil companies. And what they don't do is, in deep waters where they can't produce oil, they could look for it, but not in them days. They hadn't production facilities. It was too deep, the water. So they don't drill, that's it. But the word went out to all of anyone who was listed in Ireland. They put out the line, the oil companies. Oh, there's nothing in Ireland. We want a good deal. We want a good tax deal. That's the reason we're not drilling. And at official level, it was bought. That lie was bought. That the reason they aren't drilling was our tax deal. And I'll explain about that now in a second. They were told that we won't, unless you improve your tax, we won't come back and drill. Now, if anybody had any kind of a bit of wit about them, they'd have realised that the reason they're not drilling is the price of oil, worldwide slump, and that there was no deep water production technology at the time. It was just they could look for it, but they couldn't bring it up at that depth. The big platforms was the way they used to do it at the time. The North Sea was something about 800 foot waters, maybe 1,000. Here you're talking about nearly 3,000. So there was no way they could even build a platform to reach the seabed. They hadn't developed modern technology that the Norwegians did in later years. It was mainly Americans at this stage. Their only experience was Gulf of Mexico and land rigs, and they didn't even really know how to operate these semi-submersibles. It was a learning process for them before a lot of them. Some had come over from the North Sea, some had gone back. But there's a huge swell out there, and it can affect the whole operation. Now, I'll just roll it back to after Marathon, that deal went through. There was a realisation that we were sold a pup for £500. And a group called the Resources Protection Campaign was set up. Pat Rabbitt, Sinn Féin, official Sinn Féin was called at the time, some of the Labour Party people, they set up this lobby group to lobby for a change in the legislation. There was a coalition government from, I think, 1973 to 1977, or 72 to 77, whatever. And in 1975, as a result of this pressure, Justin Keating, the then Minister for Energy, brought in a tax deal that was basically a 50-50 split. 50% profit, 50% tax, 50% of any well discovered, apart from the tax. If an oil company finds a well, Ireland claims a non-risk 50%, 6 to 7% royalties, and a commitment for Irish jobs, goods and services. It was a good average deal. It was a good standard, kind of a world average deal in any of the developed so-called countries, right? So, again, the Resource Protection Campaign thought it didn't go far enough. It wasn't a good enough deal, but it was the deal. So from around 81, 82 on, with the pressure mounting, saying that our tax deal was the cause of it. It wasn't anything to do with, if they took their time to find out about the worldwide situation, about the price of oil and the lack of production technology. Dick Spring started a process of tinkering with the 75 terms. Now, what he did was a sliding scale of royalties and a sliding scale of ownership on any wells. Again, the essential philosophy of Keating state that Ireland would be the main beneficiary of any oil and gas found in our own waters. So, roll forward into the early 80s, as I said, an awful lot of the lads, including myself, had to go off to other countries doing other things because that work just dried up basically. There was very little of it. The production facilities kept going here with the gas, but all the exploration stuff practically ground to zero. Those bits of it we'd get, but we'd have to go away. Norway was the only country operating because they have a completely different setup, and I'll get to that. Also on land, this is another thing. There is land activity. There's areas in land up on the Cavan-Fermanagh border, Leitrim, where there's onshore gas activity. But that's a separate. But again, it's part of our whole issue. But there was some of that still going on at that stage on land. Into the mid-80s, and the Dáil records show this, there was a lot of lobbying of Ray Burke on behalf of the oil companies, Marathon. A company who had arrived in Ireland in 1984 called Enterprise Oil, set up by Dennis Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher's husband, after she denationalised British gas. Now, he was big in oil in Africa, and this was him and a few more got this thing up and running. He was one of the main shareholders at the early stages. They lobbied very quickly. They came to Ireland in 84. They didn't drill one well till 1996, the Corrib field, and they found it first go. But that's along the line in a second. The Dáil records show in 85 Burke lobbying severely hard about the tax deal, that we're not going to, we need to incentivise, we need to get them in, we have to kind of do what we can to get them in, all this kind of crap.